So how much cash was there on completion?
So I think it's about 4.2 million. Two things in my life I'd say have had a major impact on my life. One was the army, the other one's this. For me, it's been life-changing. The formula works. That if you follow that route, it works. You've got 6 million of assets, you've got 1 million of debtors. My criteria was I just wanted to buy a business where I'd earn a decent salary, something matching or close to what I was getting in corporate life. And I didn't really care what the business was. I had a certain geographic area. I looked at people over a certain age. I put in a certain bandwidth for assets that were profitable, and I wasn't that fussy after that. So I sent the letters out for that 400, and I got one reply, which was the business I bought. So, but before I go on to the rest of the story, just some of the lessons for that. So Jonathan says, get on with it at the start. So you must get on with it at the start. Don't do what I did, because it will just drag on forever. And a lot of the value of this group that you're joining, if you leave it a year until the end, you're sort of outside of it, because you'll just be a spectator. So you've got to throw yourself into it. I can't tell you what the exact sales figure was for the business because it's confidential, but it was just inside 8 figures. He said, that's what I'm looking for. So the moment he said the figure, he said that and above, that was the figure. And we never changed that figure for the rest of the process. It was then a question of how we'd do it. So I sort of said, well, it's probably going to be 80% up front, 20% deferred, which is generous. We sort of agreed that. I got the information from the company, and the first thing that struck me was researching the business was these machines that we have in the company, these vacuum excavators, which is what the business is, £450,000 each if you buy them new now. I think 10 years ago they were probably 300,000 euros, something like that. So he had invoices for vehicles that were over 10 years old that you could still sell for 100,000, but he was depreciating on the balance sheet his assets over 5 years. So a significant chunk of value in the business wasn't on the balance sheet. I could see that you could finance what he was after from leveraging the assets, leveraging the debtors, and the cash that was in the business. So any lender was pretty well protected. And then you might need a little bit of a cash flow loan based on the margin. So this business is, it's just over 10 million as a deal. You've got 6 million of assets, you've got 1 million of debtors, you've got a load of cash in the business. It's all adding up nicely. But there was a problem because there was another opportunity for me to ignore what Jonathan had taught us, which was the guy said, I'll agree to the figure then, but I want it up front. So I thought, right, okay. So I can say no to that, in which case the deal potentially was off. So I said, I will try and do it. I will, when I talk to the lenders, I will try and do that because I understand where you're coming from, but it might not be possible, but I'm going to try and do it, which to him was yes. So we carried on with the deal. And I then went through that long learning curve that some of you will go through where you go and talk to lots of different lenders about the deal. For your first deal, certainly, you need one of the contacts that Jonathan will give you. I had a great one. And he actually he opened the doors to the lenders and introduces you and that all-important conversation that he has first about, yes, this is a good person.
It's about positioning it correctly, exactly. Isn't it? Yeah. Where if you were to do it yourself, and to be fair, most lenders won't speak directly to the public. They want you to go through an intermediary because it's just far more professional and more efficient.
Yep.
But you need someone who can position your case in such a way that positions you as a credible buyer of a credible business and something that just makes sense.
Yep.
Buying a business is just so rewarding, and I put together a free training showing you exactly how I do it. If you look in the video description below this video, there is a link. You click the link, you're taken through to the training, watch the training, and I'll show you exactly how to buy a business successfully.
The important thing you need is you need in your hands, which my accountant did, which was another contact from Jonathan, you need to have your business plan in numbers. That cash flow, that understanding of how the deal's going to be structured or how you want the deal to be structured. So my deal worked for a lender. There was enough assets, enough debtors, enough cash in the business to leverage, to do that sum that I needed up front in totem. There was a slight discrepancy with maybe the headroom that was needed on the working capital in the business, but it was more or less there. So I found it very frustrating because to me it was a no-brainer. It was, they wouldn't have had many like these. And we ended up with one lender where the finance broker was adamant that they were going to do it. We had a lot of conversations with them, and it sort of dragged on. And so I Googled a list of asset lenders, and I got this list, and I went to the finance broker and I said, right, we're going to go through all of this because I want a second option. The lesson from that is, yes, the experts help you, your deal team helps you, but you've also got to help yourself. They need a bit of leading as well. So there's nothing stopping you going and looking for some other people, some other avenues to go and talk to. So we got this list, but what you don't do is go behind their back. So I went back to him and I said, well, let's try some of these. And he saw one on the list and he said, oh, I know them. They were relatively new when I last spoke to them, but let's go and talk to them. And we went and talked to this lender, and they were great. They sat down, they listened, they bought into the plan, they thought the business was amazing, and the model was good, and they said, right. And one of them was a decision maker, and they turned it around in 7 days, and they came back with the letter with the outlines of an offer, and they said, well, we'll fund it subject to all the usual due diligence. The next thing was that the lender said, right, we need to value those assets, those vehicle assets. So my business has a number of 30-ton vacuum excavator trucks, big things, worth a lot of money, and they needed to be valued. The owner had valued them at 6. I'd sort of said, well, that probably means 5 if, in my plan, the lender was going to go for. And I suddenly realized, and the lender said to me, the value is going down and you're paying for it. So I thought, okay, great. So I thought, I'm not going to let any valuer go down. If they don't understand this kit, which is actually another point, was hardly any of it has ever been sold second hand. It's that new. It stays in service a long time. So the valuers didn't really know it very well. So if they came up with a crazy valuation, that could floor my deal, because that's what the lenders use. So I interviewed 3 of them and eventually settled on one, and he went down. And he came back, and my expectation of 5 million had turned to 4 million. And I thought, oh no, this is another one of those moments you'll get where you go white and you just start to wobble and you just think, oh shit, it's all over. So I got this thing and I thought, no, I'm not going to sit on it and mope. And I went straight to the owner and I said, look at that crap. And I plonked it in front of him. And I said, look what those bastards have done. And we jointly spent an hour in outrage that this moron had valued the business, the assets way below what he thought. And we shared the outrage. And I said, well, I'm sorry, deal's off unless you take a deferred element. So that's how I got the deferred in. But not by design, by those circumstances. So we've just paid the deferred off last month.
When buying a business, you need a great lawyer on your team. So why not use mine? His name is John Andrews, and his details are on the screen.
So with my business, I've got the previous owner owned everything. That was extraordinary. I mean, he literally owned everything, even the photocopy. I mean, nothing was leased or rented. I mean, he owned the whole lot. And so I could leverage that to buy the business. So all I have to do is sit on the business for 5 years until all the money's paid off, if that's what I wanted to do. And I'll be in the same position that he was in with a slightly bigger business, well, a much bigger business, and to sell it. So I could do that and not buy any other companies and do any of the dealmaker stuff. But I am committed to the dealmaker philosophy. So I am running my business at the moment with a good management team. I go away quite a lot doing this sort of thing, so it can run itself. But I'm going to stop that at the end of this year. The commercial director will step up and be the GM to start with, and I'll run the business through him. And as soon as I can, make him the MD. And then I want to go off and buy other businesses. So the deal took a year. Now, you're hearing from Jonathan and stuff on the course. It's quite normal with the deal that you go debt-free, cash-free, don't you? So you say to the owner, you leave a bit of headroom in the working capital for running the business. They take the cash out. They make sure there's no debt. You fix the price and you go and buy the business. With my deal, the owner was very, in many ways, there was a lot of fear there. So he only knew what he knew. So that's why he owned everything, because he didn't like finance. He was always worried about things going wrong and that sort of thing. So he owned everything. And he also had a very particular view on how he ran the business that was very old-fashioned and a bit hard to understand at times. But one of them is that he thought there should be a lot of cash in the business. So when I first spoke to him, there was 3 million quid in the bank for a 5 million turnover business. Now, he's making, if you imagine, if he's bringing in, 2 million profit a year, some of it he must have spent on other things, but basically he would spend half of that money on 2 or 3 new vehicles in cash, not leased, in cash, and then he would, with the rest of the money, sit in the bank or whatever. So I worked out quite early on listening to him. I sort of said, well, what's included in the figure? And he sort of said, well, everything. It's the business that is. And I said, well, that's the cash in the business as well. And he goes, yeah, the cash is part of it. And over the course of the year, doesn't take the brains of an archbishop, if a company makes 2 million in cash over the course of a year from when you've agreed a figure here, and a year later you buy it for the figure you've agreed here, it's worth 2 million quid more, which is what happened. So
how much cash was there on completion?
I think it's about 4.2 million. That became part of the...
So you're paying a number that we can't say, but pretty...
About 40% of it was...
But 40% of it was actually
more or less
the company's own cash.
And that's just the way that the deal went. So I suppose the lesson from that, especially for someone like me, from a corporate background, and when you've done this thing and you're talking to your friends, you get all knowledgeable about deal making before you've done a deal. And, was just to shut up and listen to the bloke and just think, well, okay, he wants to do it that way, we'll do it that way, that's fine. And we didn't rip him off.
You've got to know that that's a good deal.
You've got to know.
And some people wouldn't know that's a good deal.
Yeah.
But you've got to know that's a good deal. And it's like, well, if that's the deal that he wants, that's a good deal. Let's do it.
Top 5 costs of the business, when I listed the top 5 costs, there were 2 fitters, 2 mechanics in the workshop, one of whom left just as we took over. So there's one mechanic in this big workshop. And vehicles were coming in and sitting there, and I realized that in the industry, in construction and in fleet, it's quite normal. We had a truck go off the road to go to Mercedes, which needed a new radiator, and they actually said to us, there's a shortage of spares, it'll take 2 months. 2 months? You can't survive that sort of thing. So the first thing I did was I thought, well, I'm going to get rid of those costs by bringing everything in-house. So we spent 100 grand on a vehicle pit with all this sort of inspection-based stuff, and we bought everything in. So we can do everything on these vehicles except the actual MOT test. And we did that in 2 months. That was the first thing I did. The result of that is the vehicle utilization went from 70% to, in fact, we averaged last year after August to the year end, we averaged 94%. So what does that mean? Well, that means these vehicles, 450 grand each, because I learned this in DHL with aeroplanes. In an airline, you'll die instantly if your planes aren't in the air, if they're on the ground, because they're so expensive. And so you get this method, this sort of change the culture and get the vehicles out. The revenue to March before I bought the business was 5.2 million with 22 rigs. The revenue March 2023 with 22 rigs was 6.6. So that's your utilization.
So it's an extra 1.4 million.
Yeah. So for me, it's been as the other people have found, deal makers, it's been life-changing. I'm very grateful to Jonathan and the course, but it's very much a team thing in here. I mean, there are 2 things in my life I'd say have had a major impact on my life. One was the army, the leadership development in that, and the other one's this. The formula works. That if you follow that route, it works. The people who don't, I suspect, do it is there's just certain hurdles you have to get over. And I would always say, if the bit you're listening to is, well, I can buy a business without my own money, it can run itself if I buy the right one, and I can go straight to playing golf. And it's just a bish, bash, bosh process. And, I just have to find a business, and lender will give me the money, and I'll buy it, and I'll say hello, and then that's me done, and I'll live a life of O'Reilly. Then you're on the wrong tangent. It requires a lot of commitment, a lot of hard work. And you've got to avoid the distractions that people like me did to stray off the course. But it is very, very rewarding.